bon vespre a totes i a tots i benvingudes a la primera sessió del cicle de converses d'enguany, un cicle que organitza la Fundació Mallorca Literària. Enguany és la seva 7a edició, cosa que celebrem, que arribem en aquest 7è any. I la proposta d'aquest cicle, farem ara una mica de repàs per introduir la conversa amb la Groff i la Míriam Cano. La proposta és crear uns espais de diàleg entorn de la lectura sempre amb un fil temàtic determinat que convoca tot un seguit de trobades anuals on hi participen autores, editores, lectores, prescriptores, gent al voltant del món del llibre. Altres anys, aquestes converses s'han centrat, per exemple, en lectures germinades, és a dir, amb llibres i obres d'art que se derivaven d'aquests llibres. També van tenir lectures de viatge, on la narrativa servia de bitllet d'avió, d'invitació per conèixer destinacions del món. En temps pandèmics, en aquella època, en aquell any 2020, les converses se van centrar en les lectures com a espai de refugi i l'any passat la proposta era connectar autors de la generació dels 70 a Mallorca amb autors d'altres generacions posterior i vincular les seves lectures i escriptures. Aquestes són algunes de les lectures cap a les quals ha volgut orientar aquest cicle, ha volgut orientar la Fundació Mallorca Literària aquestes converses en anys precedents, com deia, sempre amb aquesta intenció de fomentar la lectura i el gaudi compartit d'aquesta lectura. Tanmateix, però, l'edició que encetam enguany connecta directament amb una de les passades, que és la que se va celebrar l'any 2018, quan la proposta era que tinguessin per protagonistes les converses les escriptores en cambra pròpia, per recollir aquella proposta de Virginia Woolf de dones que tenen un lloc a on escriure i reivindicar l'escriptura feta per dones. El ventall de lectures d'aquell any, del 2018, va passar per autores patrimonials com Emily Dickinson, Montserrat Abelló, Maria Mercè Marçal. Dic tots aquests noms perquè en aquell any l'accent ja se posava en dones que des de sempre, històricament, han observat, han descrit, han explicat i ens han intentat ajudar a canviar el món. Des de la narrativa, la poesia o l'assaig, des de la literatura en definitiva. La proposta d'enguany és posar una altra vegada el focus en la narrativa escrita per dones, si bé aquest pic ens volem centrar durant tot aquest cicle de converses en autores actuals, en les protagonistes d'aquesta narrativa contemporània que han fet realitat aquest el manco aparent equilibri iniciàtic, diré fins i tot, quant a llibres publicats per homes i llibres publicats per dones, com passa també en altres sectors de la literatura, com pugui ser l'edició, la prescripció, la traducció i, evidentment, ho donant per fet la lectura, on hi ha tantes dones com homes al manco. L'edició d'enguany, com deia, de les converses centrarà la mirada sobre una selecció de novel·les escrites per dones que ens permetran posar sobre la taula temàtiques i qüestions que des de diferents cultures i també en diferents llengües ens xerren dels debats que nodreixen el nostre dia a dia, l'emergència climàtica, els límits del llenguatge, la intel·ligència artificial, les relacions personals. Tot això són alguns dels camins que plantegen a la selecció de llibres i autores que protagonitzaran tot aquest cicle, emmarat, mai millor dit, amb aquest concepte que ens remet en els orígens i alhora ens convida a imaginar nous futurs, Màtria, que dona nom al cicle de converses d'enguany. Avui l'inauguram amb una novel·la que precisament fa això, ens convida a viatjar 1000 anys enrere per assenyalar-los les emergències que tenim en el present i, per tant, construir sobre elles múltiples possibilitats de futur, no només la que el dia d'avui mos empeny. Matrix és el títol d'aquesta novel·la i tot això ho fa l'obra a través d'una protagonista que és singular, és única, és autònima, és lliure, independent, però a través de la seva singularitat transforma la seva manera d'entendre l'amor i el poder en universals. Per això ens acompanya l'autora d'aquest llibre, Groff, per conversar amb la traductora al català, Míriam Cano, de l'altra editorial. Lauren, Míriam, gràcies per acompanyar-nos i benvingudes en primer lloc.
Gràcies a vosaltres per haver-me convidat, per haver-nos convidat, però sobretot per l'oportunitat de parlar d'aquest llibre tan bonic amb la Lauren.
Oh, I get to say something too. I'm very excited.
If you want.
Hi, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here, both of you. Look at this amazing human who does the translations. Translators are my heroes. Interpreters are my heroes. Thank you back there. So I'm delighted to be here in Mallorca, enjoying your incredible food and the vistas, and talking about Matrix with the person whose voice in Catalan it is. So, yeah.
Tenir la veu original i la veu traduïda, que és la que han llegit molts dels que som aquí. És també un honor i tenim moltes ganes d'escoltar aquesta conversa, però per emmarcar aquestes converses voldríem començar i acabar sempre amb la mateixa pregunta i, per tant, l'encetarem avui amb una pregunta que encetarà totes les converses posteriors, que és què vos suggereix a vosaltres aquest concepte de màtria emmarat valgui la redundància, totes les converses. Vos fa pensar en aquest lloc o no lloc des d'on s'escriu la literatura per part de les dones? Existeix? És un invent? Hi ha un posicionament polític a darrere? En què vos fa pensar aquest Màtria que dona títol a les converses? I el llibre, evidentment.
Oh, for me, there are politics always in all things, right? I mean, you can't extricate politics from being alive. But I do think this world of writing, this literary world, is it has yet to be fully discovered, right? And I'm so glad that you're opening up this conversation because it is endless, because there's so many voices that have been lost, right, through history. Anonymous is a woman, right? That's the very famous quote. So I think, of course it's political, but I'd love to know what Míriam has to say about this.
Yes. Jo ara parlaré en català, aquesta primera pregunta. Clar, abans li explicava a la Loren que de vegades això de la traducció, no saps com, encavalques diversos llibres i just l'any que vaig traduir, o el curs, que jo funciono per cursos, el curs que vaig traduir Màtries, vaig començar traduint Baluards de supèrbia de la Martha Nussbaum, que és un llibre que parla de com els homes s'han encobert històricament els uns als altres de les acusacions d'assetjament i d'abús sexual. Vaig continuar amb la Joanna Russ, amb el com destruir l'escriptura de les dones, i vaig acabar el curs amb el Màtries. I els meus amics em deien: ostres, estàs emprenyada últimament, et notem emprenyada. I jo pensava, clar, perquè justament jo estava vivint a nivell laboral, diguem-ne, en un matriarcat. Hi havia diverses dones que m'estaven explicant coses. Recordo que vaig fer un tuit en què deia: de la Martha Nussbaum n'he après el llarg camí que s'ha fet per arribar fins on som ara, que és molt poquet, i totes les dones que han obert aquest camí. De la Joanna Russ n'he après que no és culpa meva, no és que els meus col·legues de professió els hi caigui malament, és el patriarcat, que té mecanismes molt perversos. I de la Maria de França, de la Lauren Groff, vaig aprendre que si la vida et posa en situacions difícils, fes-ne el que puguis i fes-ho amb les teves amigues. I van ser 3 aprenentatges molt valuosos. Aquesta valentia de la Maria de Màtries, jo crec que em va reafirmar en aquest poder de que les dones no necessiten cap autoritat masculina o cap saber masculí per sortir-se'n totes soles. I ja us dic, vaig viure 8 mesos en un matriarcat.
Precisament xerraves ara d'aquest aprenentatge, Míriam, i m'agradaria, si voleu començar la conversa, per tot l'aprenentatge que hi ha hagut darrere també a nivell de vocabulari, per part de l'experiència que ella va viure per documentar-se i per investigar, que és una experiència que heu fet totes dues. Ella per escriure el llibre, però tu també per traduir-lo, no?
Sí. Clar, hi havia una cosa amb la traducció, que clar, tota la documentació, és un llibre que està molt ben documentat, Màtries, si l'heu llegit ho sabreu, i que, clar, a nivell de traducció implicava que, com que és un llibre també escrit molt poèticament, jo hagués de contrastar tota aquesta documentació que hi havia al darrere. Per exemple, hi ha un cas molt clar, que és, hi ha un moment en què la Loren diu, la narradora, diguem-ne, aquesta veu de la novel·la, diu: les cerveses descansen sota el riu glaçat. I jo vaig dir, ostres, això és una llicència poètica o què passa aquí? I llavors vaig anar a Google i vaig buscar procés de fermentació de la cervesa. Llavors vaig descobrir que la cervesa fermenta en fred i que, per tant, antigament les posaven sota els rius i llavors quan venia l'estiu tenien cerveses fresquetes i fermentades. Però, clar, hi ha un nivell de documentació tan gran a la novel·la de la Loren, a nivell, per exemple, de materials de construcció, els terres de palla, que a les pel·lícules no surten. Els terres de les pel·lícules són de pedra sempre, perquè estèticament són més bonics. Els terres de palla, les finestres de banya, i jo cada cop ho anava buscant. Sí, és veritat, en aquella època es feia servir banya per fer les finestres. I llavors, a nivell de llenguatge, que ara jo crec que estaria molt bé també que la Loren, a banda de la documentació, ho expliqués, a nivell de llenguatge, ella utilitza un anglès arcaïtzant, que no arcaic, i jo havia de trobar un model de català que fos arcaïtzant i no arcaic. No? I això també a nivell, per exemple, de dir, ostres, no? Vaig al Merriam-Webster a buscar el nom d'aquesta flor, no? O d'aquest animal, o d'aquest... I em sortia, el primer que em sortia sempre era arcaic, no sé què, no? La definició. I llavors jo anava intentant adaptar a un model de català que em anés bé aquest treball amb la llengua que havia fet ella, no? Que em sembla també molt interessant per construir aquest univers. No? És un univers documentat, penso, tant des d'això, no? Des de les eines, des de tot aquest univers més tangible fins a la qüestió del llenguatge. No?
No, it's interesting. I wanted to write a book that felt deeply researched without ever sort of throwing the research in the writer's or the reader's face, right? So there's a certain level of lightness that you have to have, and a certain level of sort of playing around with language so that it sounds strange, but not so strange that it becomes almost like a very bad film of the Middle Ages, right? So it's hitting a tonal balance that is actually really hard to do in one language, let alone in two, which is what you did, right? So you know, we did have to build this world to sort of to play with multiple modes of time and space and detail and things that are research without necessarily like making people feel like overwhelmed with it's a very short book, right? It's 250 pages, but
yeah. I remember, for example, there were a lot of characters. We will talk about the nuns and this matriarchy, in fact. But I remember, for example, the medical terms or the medical. There's a scene in which Marie has to have a teeth removed, and it's amazing. Like this little light, the honey, I think, no? Yeah. But did you invent it all that?
No.
Real? Yeah.
So in this book, there's almost nothing invented but what happens, right? Yeah. And the character of Marie herself, right? Everything else I tried to base on real facts, but also on apocryphal facts too, because the Middle Ages were strangely recorded, of course, and the lives of ordinary women were not deemed interesting enough to actually put down on paper. So a lot had to be inferred through the lives of other people, just information that historians have gleaned and come up with, ideas that about the time that may or may not be real, and also mythology, right? Because we tell stories, myths actually hold a lot of truths in them, even if those truths are maybe a little bit bent and a little bit strange, they have emotional truth to them too. So in the book, there's this labyrinth, right? This very large sort of, it is the motif of the book, and it is the structure of the book. The architecture, the physical architecture of the book itself is built in a labyrinthine form. And of course, there is no documented labyrinth in England from this time that is that big. But there is a story, and a very beautiful story that I wanted to put in the book about Henry II, the husband of Eleanor of Aquitaine, the second husband, who, eventually he got very estranged from Eleanor. And at a certain time, he had this amazingly beautiful mistress named Rosamond. And so the myth was Henry put Rosamond into the center of this garden labyrinth maze to keep her away from his dragon wife, Eleanor. But Eleanor found a way to get in and poison Rosamond, and so she died young. So I thought this is, so even though there's no documented labyrinth in the historical record, it exists in the narrative record, right? The mythology of the time, the songs that the troubadours are singing, these sort of fabulations and exaggerations, and I wanted to replicate that in the book as well.
And what came first, the idea of writing about Marie de France, or the idea of writing about a community of women, the matriarchy?
Oh, well, so I actually have written a totally different novel about Marie de France probably 15 years ago, and it was so bad. So I put it to the side. I've loved her for decades. I think she's one of the greats, right? And she doesn't get taught, at least in schools in the United States. I hope she gets taught here. No? We'll change that. But she's magnificent, right? She tells these stories, especially the lay. They're so profound and weird and rich, and they reflect the courtly love of the time. And there's a gay werewolf story in the lay of Marie de France, right? It's really, really strange. They're just vibrant as heck. And I was a young student, very nerdy, at university, and I was doing these translations from ancien français into English, and I just loved Marie. I just loved the vibrancy and the animal nature and the hunger in these lay. So she stayed with me. I wrote this failed novel. And then one day, I had a fellowship at Harvard, and my fellow was one of the most beautiful humans I've ever met. She is a specialist in medieval nuns, right? So she loves these women very deeply. And she was just radiantly pregnant at the time as well, which kind of added to like this joy of her telling these stories about these nuns. And I was sitting in the audience, and I was sort of like, I guess I was overcome with tsunami waves of love for these medieval nuns that she was talking about. And suddenly I had this idea that Marie came back to me, and I was like, oh my God, I can write a book about women, about Marie de France, about nuns, about the modern world, and I don't even actually have to talk about the modern world, right? I don't have to talk about Donald Trump, because who wants to talk about him? I don't have to talk about cell phones and computers. I can talk about the things that are urgent without necessarily having to deal with these things that are just like making me crazy and sad. So that's where the book came from. Yeah.
Yeah, now you're saying who wants to talk about Donald Trump, but there's a lot of power in your novel, no? There are a lot of ideas concerning the good ways to exercise power, the bad ways, the erotics of power, no? In Eleanor, for example.
Oh, I love Eleanor. I love Eleanor. And I love the actual historical figure of Eleanor of Aquitaine, right? She's amazing. She's really great. Because she had sort of a typical feminine power, right? She was powerful from the beginning because she was born into this very wealthy family. She was the wealthiest heiress in Europe at the time. So she first marries the King of France, who was just like very ecclesiastical. And she didn't really like him that much, but she had a couple of his kids. And then she decided, I don't like him. And so she got the marriage annulled, jumped over to England, married the next king, and raised up her children to try to usurp her husband's kingdom, right? So she's a very powerful woman, and she did it through this wickedly brilliant political savvy, and she was the friend of popes, of kings throughout Europe. She had spies in every court. I mean, she was the epitome of beauty, right? She did everything in a very feminine way. But I wanted a character who maybe stood outside of this feminine understanding of power. I wanted a character who maybe reflected a little bit of Hillary Clinton, right? Who was trying very hard to put her feet in both masculine power and feminine power, and ultimately maybe didn't have any of either. And I wanted to think through a bunch of things about power, like I was raised by a feminist man. My dad is wonderful. I love him very much, but he's also a romantic about women. And his romanticism is, he would always say, if women were the president, if women ruled the world, we'd never have war. And we'd all be fed. And it's possible, right? Who knows? We've never had the opportunity to test it out. But the likelihood is women are people, right? We are full of rage. We are full of hunger. We're full of anger. We're full of ambition. It's likely that we will also be corrupt and lead the world into treacherous waters. So who knows what feminine power could be? So I might as well make a microcosm and sort of test out what female power possibly could be, right? Since we're not going to see it in the real world, well, maybe I could do it in fiction.
Yes. I was now remembering that chapter in which the men of the town, they want to enter the labyrinth, and then Marie is like, okay, we're going to defend our abbey, no? And they organize themselves like an army, and the army of nuns, no? And yeah, this kind of violence, and Maria, I said Maria, Marie is cruel sometimes, and is a hard woman, and she's capable of organizing the whole abbey, but also to organize an army of nuns to kill people without regrets, no? And she exercises this kind of masculine power. No?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Eleanor of Aquitaine in the Second Crusade actually did have a ladies' army where she drummed up a lot of the ladies of France, and they came in their silken white and red tunics, and they there's this Turkish historian of the time who mentioned them sort of coming down a hill with their hair sort of flowing behind them, and this is just this image that I couldn't shake, right? It's such a beautiful image of these like Amazon women happening. So it exists as maybe apocryphal knowledge in the historical record. And there have always been women who have sort of bucked the norms of the time, right? Who have not manifested femininity in the way that they were supposed to, who have been fighters and warriors. I mean, it exists, you know, in every army. There is someone who later has been unmasked with a female body. So what I was really excited about was this opportunity for Marie, and it's a little bit of a cheeky passage, right? It's supposed to be a little bit funny, where these men come in and try to, like, you know, take the goods of the abbey, and the nuns fight. But of course, you know, Marie never gets to fight because she's sort of the general, and she's very disappointed that she doesn't get to kill anyone as the abbess of an abbey. So yeah, you know, she has this idea of herself as something very different from what the actuality is.
There's also a lot of religion, of course, because the novel happens in an abbey. And when I was translating it, I was thinking all the time, well, Maria believes or not in God. Emme believes in God or not, because there's that scene when they too go to the poisoned crops, and Emme starts to do a ritual there, and Maria says, "Wow, where did you learn this?" "Ah, no, I have just invented all the thing away, you know." And there's also a sense, like, as if religion was a refugee in a sense, like the only place where women, that's in the Middle Ages, could be safe and could do anything in community or alone. No?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the role of a woman back then was much tighter, right? And if you didn't grow up to become a mother, you were expected to go to an abbey, right? So I think at least there was that you could have a real vocation. And there are people in the book who have real vocations that are really passionate about God and believe very deeply. But I also, you know, again, this is not unusual in all communities. There are people who have their own ideas about God and religion. And these exist also in the historical record. I wanted to give them space, right? Which perhaps they didn't have nearly as much in reality as they do in the book. But I wanted them to be able to breathe a little bit, to have this space outside of motherhood as an alternative to motherhood and just putting babies into the world, right? But it's interesting that the more you research, the more your own preconceived ideas about any given time are challenged, right? And I was so astonished by the real power of an abbess at the time, or the real power of these women who were the heads of these vast estates with many, they were basically slaves at the time, and in charge of knights, and had servants, and they had to read and write in multiple languages, right? They had to be able to count, which a lot of women were not even taught to do these things, except that the ones who are raised in upper class, societies tended to be, because they knew that when the men were off fighting, they had to stay, and they had to, keep the states going. So these abbesses, there are these historical abbesses who were incredibly powerful, very smart, businesswomen, basically, back in the Middle Ages. And at a certain point, the abbey is sort of run by women in England. They had more land than the King of England had at a certain point. So I thought that was really kind of strange and astonishing, and it pushed against my preconceived ideas of what the Middle Ages were like for people like them.
We were talking about religion before, and Maria has a lot of visions during the novel. And one thing I asked myself during the translation was, well, is she using these visions to achieve what she wants to do in the Abbey? I mean, the labyrinth, the house of the abbess, everything is kind of dictated by her visions, no? And the nuns obey not Marie, but the Virgin or something, no? And I think it's a very intelligent way to urge people to do to do things, no? I have seen that we have to build up a labyrinth. I have seen that we have to build up the house of the abbess, and quickly all the nuns start to work, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so medieval abbesses, or not mystics, are some of my favorite humans on the planet. There's one named Hildegard von Bingen, which, if you're not familiar with her, she is just awesome. She's just so cool. You probably have heard her music. She was a musician. She was a composer. She was a genius at medical science. She wrote a book of medicine that was used for 4 centuries after her death, right? So she wasn't just a mystic. And also, I have to say, Hildegard came into her spiritual powers after menopause. So when the fertility fell out of her body, the spirituality came in, and she became the intercessor between her nuns and God. And the thing that I love the most about the mystics, particularly Hildegard, who is one of the models for Marie, is that they took this thing that was abstract, right? These voices from God, these images from God that would come down, and it would pass through them, and it'd become concrete good in the world, right? It would go in a wave and become this powerful way of actually living in the material world. So Hildegard, through her visions, was able to raise enough money to build her own abbey and protect her sisters under her care. And she was able to become the interlocutor and friend to really powerful people in the world. So I just thought that was really extraordinary, an unbelievably smart way to sort of wield power, to take power, and it's I would like to keep the possibility open, both possibilities open, that these really are gifts from God. And these people were geniuses who knew how to take the abstract and make it concrete. Yeah.
You were talking about menopause, and when I finished translating the book, I had the feeling of having done a trip through a journey to the life of a woman, no? The biological life of a woman from teenager until her death, no? And it was beautiful because your book is also full of bodies of desire, of biological processes. I wanted you to talk about this because we will talk more about desire because it's very present, but biologically. There's because nobody talks about menopause, for example, is uninteresting to people.
It's very interesting.
It's very interesting, yeah. But it's like no. And for example, when Marie starts to feel the scene, for example, in the when she takes a bath under the moon, and under the moon, starting the menopause, it's all this symbolic journey, and biological journey through the life of a woman is also very interesting.
I love that you said that because this is very intentional, right? So I said earlier that the labyrinth is the underlying architecture of the book, and I think you know the book so intimately as a translator. You saw it immediately that a unicursal labyrinth like the one in Chartres Cathedral in France was supposed to symbolize the progression of the pilgrim to Jerusalem. Right, and so I wanted, in some ways, to create an architecture that was very similar. Right, it's sort of tracking through life, all the way around to Jerusalem or death. Right, which is happening in the book. So the structure is the life. The other architectural structure in the book is. Kind of funny, and forgive me if I offend you. I don't mean to. I'm sorry in advance. But most narratives are built on a Freytag's pyramid, right? So there's rising action, climax, and then descending action, right? That is the classical Aristotelian structure of a narrative, of Greek plays all the way through history. But a friend of mine once said, did you ever notice that the Aristotelian structure is based on a male orgasm? And I said, oh my God, right? This is crazy. Are you kidding me? So what would a female orgasm look like as structure? So that's my other structural architecture for this book. Yeah, like a jellyfish.
Yeah, now that you say. No, because every chapter, I remember when I was translating, I loved the end of every chapter, no? There was like this sense of, no? And it's like that, yeah. I didn't know that.
Oh, well, now you do.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were talking about desire, no? There's a lot of desire in your book from the beginning, because when Marie is young, she has a lover, and she's in love with Eleanor. And after that, when she, in a way, has renounced to desire, she finds the desire again in the day of the tooth removed, indeed. And the desire is something that is present in Marie's life until his death, until her death, no? And yeah, I wanted you to talk about the presence of this desire in your novel, because there's a kind of taboo in nuns, lesbian nuns, and even when Maria is dead, the last page of the book, there's these two nuns kissing each other, like wow, no, and one of her legacies to all that nuns in the abbey is also the possibility of desire, no?
Yeah, so there was this Italian nun in the Middle Ages named Bernadetta, and you may have known of her, but she got in a great deal of trouble for having favorites who would come. She would come into their room at night and basically have sex with them. So this is not in the historical record, and of course there are many examples of nuns becoming pregnant and nuns running off with priests, or the traveling mendicant. Who knows? So what I was interested in is desire, is the animal, is ambition, is sort of almost unruly passion. When I started the book, I really didn't know. I mean, I had the structure of the book. I was given that when I was sitting in the audience and my friend was giving the lecture on medieval nuns. But I really didn't know where to begin, right? There's so much to do. So what I did was I sat down with Marie de France's actual texts that we think that she had written. The Lay, the collection of basically short stories in poetic form, retold from Breton folklore, and the Fables. And I pulled out these little pieces that were the most vivid, the most lively, that sort of illustrated the mind of the person who was writing these things. And I put them into a single document, and it became this very powerful, overwhelming document of female desire and ambition. So I knew from the beginning that my character had to be over-large, over-ambitious, over-hungry. She sort of spilled past the boundaries of the things that were expected of her. And so this book is really like a resistance in some ways to sort of the systemic or hierarchical cage that she had been put into at the time. She found every way she possibly could to push against, to subvert, right? That's her only job. And of course, when she took power, it sort of turned in her a little bit, and she started doing that to the people around her. So this is not a hagiography in any way, but it is a book about hunger, ambition, desire, wanting more than you are given, and she's just a person like this. She, if she lived now, she would be the CEO of a brutally evil company, probably, right? I mean, she's someone who just wants. She would have Jeff Bezos's yacht out there that I hear was here. Yuck. So she's a little bit of a proto-capitalist, which is, and I love Marie, but, she's got some problems. So, and the physical was a part of that, right? This was a person who, no matter where she was, would have found a way to satiate her hunger and her animal desires. And even if that is in an abbey with, hundreds of nuns.
But I think she loves 3 women during her life. Her mother, of course, that also her aunts. But there are 3 central women in her life: her mother, Eleanor, and Wulfhild. No, Wulfhild is is my favorite character, because when she takes Wulfhild to the abbey, she's trying to give an opportunity to that intelligent, smart girl, and when she allows her to get married, to have a family, and she understands that to let Wulfhild to her life means keeping Wolfhill by her side in a way, and she invents this job for Wolfhill in the Abbey. And I remember that when I was translating the scene, everybody has read the book.
It's
that
okay.
the very scene in which Wolfhild dies. No, I remember crying because
good.
I was crying.
My goal is to make everyone cry.
Yeah.
I want to make
With
them
this
cry.
scene, it's like Wolfhild. I don't want Wolfhild to die, no. And so Maria loves these three women in three different ways, no. As a daughter, as a lover, and as a mother, in a way, no. There are three kinds of love also in.
She also loves Cecily, who is this friend of her youth who comes back in her old age. And I think she genuinely, truly, truly loves her daughters. Not at the beginning of the book, but the women under her care, she loves them so deeply, right? And that's why she does all the work that she does. That's why she becomes the abbess that she didn't want to be. She thinks of herself, and she is narcissistic, right? She is this grandiose person who has this idea of herself that may not be actually equal in the world, but she believes that she is creating almost a cathedral of her own body to protect these women. So yes, you are correct. She has passion for her mother and Eleanor and Wolfhild, but there are other kinds of love too, right? There are little softer kinds of love in the book as well.
There's also the way you treat, for example, of course, Marie has his biological cycle, but I remember when, for example, Viwe or the other old nuns, they have dementia, and I love that part because nobody talks about old women, no? And you give them a central role in the novel.
I love old women. I'm going to be an old woman. I hope. So here's the thing. So to do research for this book, I did go to an abbey of Benedictine nuns in Connecticut. It's this incredible place called Regina Laudis. And in the Benedictine Creed, there is hospitality is mandated. Basically, they have to open up their lives for other people to come in. So I applied to the abbess of this incredible abbey, and she let me come for a few days. And I was able to go to a few masses. She took me in and allowed me to actually talk to a lot of the nuns, which is very unusual because they're really retired nuns. They do not interact with the world, really. And they let me work with them out in the gardens. I ripped up old tomato vines and chopped wood. There's this 96-year-old nun who could chop wood faster than any human I've ever seen in my life. But one of the things that moved me so profoundly, it was just the most moving thing, was that, becoming a retired nun is not a popular choice anymore, for a lot of reasons, and we can get into that. But there aren't that many young nuns, right? And there are a lot of older and aging and sickening nuns, right? The nuns that are getting very, very ill. And so some of the younger nuns were approached by the abbess, and they were asked to go back to school to become nurses so that they could nurse their sisters through sickness and into death. And I was so wildly moved by this, right? I was looking at that as in comparison to what I know of dying, at least in the United States, which is done mostly out of sight, out of smell of people who love you, who come to visit once in a while, but it's usually people who are paid, right, to minister to the body to the end. And it feels very... The way that we have it now feels very clinical, it feels very sad, it feels very separate from family life, from the way that we are meant to die. And the way that the nuns are doing it feels very right, very real, very, very much like the way we should be doing death. So that, in some ways, even though it's the Middle Ages, they had some things that were better than our supposedly modern healthcare, at least, can give us anymore. I mean, I know that some people do die well, right? And that is something that we can plan for if we are lucky, but it's rare and it's difficult nowadays. So I wanted to pay attention to that and sort of tip my hat to these beautiful nuns at Regina Laudis who know how to do it.
Yeah, and also there's a community of women living together, doing things, in terms of logistics and everything. But in this part of the book, when nuns are old and they have these diseases and everything, they help each other just by being together, no? And I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and there is healing in community, for sure. I mean, anyone who's been lonely, and I've been lonely, that's why I'm a writer, right? Because we are existentially lonely human beings who just want to connect to other people, even if we don't like being at a party with them. But we do want to connect, right? Maybe across the page. I do love that. I love that aspect of this community. I actually write mostly about community, even when I start a book that I think is going to be the exact opposite of the book that I've done before. It ends up being about community. And about sort of the tensions of the individual versus community, things like that. So I think it's partially because I'm from an incredibly tiny village where everyone knew everyone's business. Like, you could look at someone and see sort of the web of relationship and story that's sort of built around them, like a spider cocoon, right? Like, and I long for that. Right? I could still long for that. I'm in a different place, and everywhere I go, I'm trying to sort of pull people in so that I can see this sort of web of connection. I think we're missing it. I think that's another thing, like death, like aging, like menopause, that possibly people in the past did know how to deal with better. Community, although I have to say, you're all here in the same room. So you're building community here too. It's something that it's hard now with our fragmented age, the age of the internet, where you can sit at home night after night for 2 years in the pandemic and never actually see someone outside of your house. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not acabant.
Sorry.
Vale, fantastic. I have last question. To me, there are two important moments in Maria's life. When her bird dies, when that servant comes with a handkerchief and everything, and she decides that she has to do something with her life. Her past life is gone with a dead bird. And when Maria has died, Tilde decides to burn all the books, no? And suddenly it's like, no. Maria is gone, or all that she has seen, all that she has created, not only in terms of writing, also what she has built up, no? This way of thinking is gone, and Tilde represents, to me, an ancient point of view, an ancient way of doing, no? Respect. In comparison to what Maria does in the Abbey, no?
There's a great irony that I was trying to play with there, where what we know of the real Marie de France, all we know of her are the lay and the fables, right? That's all that's left behind. And my Marie, in her book, she thought she was going to be known for building an alternative to sort of the structures and the hierarchies of the church. She thought that her mysticism would have been a different guide into the future. And then when it's thrown into the fire, right, all of that hope burned up, and all that was left were the things that she really didn't, the secular stories that she was interested in. So that was the irony of the book, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going back to the very beginning. Oh, we're cycling. This is wonderful. But Anonymous was a woman, right? And how many texts have been burned up by people who've been scared of what they could do? Who knows? We'll never know.
I'm really sorry to do this because I would like to hear you for 2 hours more, but it's 9 o'clock, so
oh my
yeah,
God.
Yeah, it's been an hour. Yeah, it was so interesting. I love to hear from both of you. To finish, I said we will have the first question and the last question every time we do this. So the last one is we are trying to build this matrix, this community of women writers or editors or whatever, or readers. So I would like you to add one name to this matrix for us. You said Hildegarda, you said Mary. One name, one woman, maybe it's contemporary, maybe only one. Yeah, I know it's a hard question. I know, I'm so sorry.
Not fair.
Yeah, only one, if you can start with them.
Bé, jo crec que el meu seria Cynthia Ozick. Cynthia Ozick, I love Cynthia Ozick.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have seen this video in which she tells Raymond Carver, I think, or no, and she's in the audience, and Norman Mailer. It was Norman Mailer. Norman Mailer, who has said before that his literature is something that comes directly from his testicles, no? And Cynthia Ozick, he was in the audience, and asked him, well, Mr. Mailer, when you dip your pen in your testicles, I would really like to know which color is the ink, no? And yeah, Cynthia Ozick was this, she is brave. She's still writing. She wrote her last book during the lock-up antiquities. And then Lionel Shriver wrote a bad review in the New York Times, and she answered with a poem, with a really great poem. So yeah, I think there's a lot of women, but I'm fascinated by Cynthia Ozick. Her compromise with literature in terms of thinking, in terms of writing, and her braveness to confront her contemporary male writers.
Yeah, I love Cynthia Ozick too. So I was going to say Elena Ferrante, but the truth is people have this idea that it may actually be Domenico Starnone and his wife together, so I can't actually say, right? That's not it. So instead I'm going to say it's Anne Carson, who is a crazy genius, and both things are true. She's crazy. And she's a genius. And she plays with, she's a Greek scholar, and she translates, all of the Greeks. But she's also just so brilliant, and she changes them, and she writes these poem cycles, and she writes, if you're interested, the autobiography of Red is a great classic.
Yeah, I have translated autobiography.
You did not!
Yeah, I've got a grant last year. Yeah, I've got.
I'm touching
Anne Carson.
her.
Yeah,
she's great.
Autobiography of Red is incredible.
It's so good. Right, buy her translation and the original one. It's an amazing book. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Everything she writes is different and strange. You're not going to like everything, but she dares to be.
And the preface
abrasive.
is incredible.
Yes.
The preface for
She's just brilliant. Yeah, she's just brilliant. Yeah.
Quin moment més màgic, no?, de final. Ha estat la cirereta. Abans de res, recordar-vos, avui hem inaugurat el cicle, però dimecres que ve a les 7 a la llibreria Drac Màgic, Cati Aguirre, Noelia Díaz Vicedo. Si voleu els llibres, tant Màtrix com els de la setmana que ve els trobareu aquí de fora. Sí, no sé si vos han quedat preguntes a fer, comentaris, si heu llegit els llibres, si voleu fer qualque pregunta a Míriam, a Loren, aprofitant que les tenim aquí. Gràcies, en tot cas, ha estat un plaer escoltar-vos a totes dues. Si qualcú vol aprofitar l'oportunitat? No? Sí, hi ha una mà aixecada, no sé. Sí. Ara t'acosten un micro. Ara t'acostaran un micròfon.
Thank you. ¿Lo puedo decir en inglés? Sí, ok. I am an aspiring writer as well. And I was fascinated with how you were talking about Marie, like if she was some kind of like autonomous person. And I've always wondered, how do you distance yourself from your characters and how do you make them their own person? If you could sort of explain how you do it.
Oh, yes, and also go, please write like hell. Don't stop. Just like don't let anything stop you, okay? Build a cathedral around your work and protect it. So the way that I do it, and everyone has a different way of doing it, but I have OCD, so it's really hard for me to actually to write, physically write, because I would fix the same sentence for 3 years and never write anything. So I figured out that for my work, I have to write longhand, right? I can't read my own handwriting, so it's part of it. And I write in drafts, full drafts. So I write as quickly as possible through the first draft, put it to the side, don't ever look at it again because I can't read my own handwriting, and then start over again. And it's beautiful because I do this over and over and over again. For Matrix, I probably wrote 9 separate, full, complete drafts. What happens is, between the draft that you put aside and the draft that you start, it's like a forest fire has come through, has burned down everything that is not necessary, and only the living things remain. And so over the course of time, what I'm doing is, and here's a completely different metaphor that I'm using, but it's like a 3-dimensional printer. So the characters start to get these weirdnesses, these specificity, the specificity that's different, right? And until you're building something that's 3-dimensional and you can turn it around and it becomes a completely whole character in and of itself, separate from you. This is the only way I have found to work. Other people have used different ways. I would not necessarily recommend this because it's really hard. But if you're struggling with something, might as well try for a draft of a short story or something to see if writing and rewriting in a different way and rewriting in a different way can build an unusual character for you.
Great, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
No hi ha més preguntes, més comentaris? Ningú més? No? Moltíssimes gràcies, Loren. Thank you very much. Gràcies, Míriam.
Gràcies a vosaltres.
Do you say moltíssimes gràcies?
Ah! Can you say it again? Yeah, sure.
Moltíssimes gràcies.